So, yeah, hello everyone. Am I audible? Okay. So, I will continue. You will have to bear with me for some more time, please. But this is a topic which I hold very close to my heart, very dearly, and which is manufacturing in India. And I'll be now walking you through on how to manufacture in India. While Mr. Rao did mention about why you should manufacture in India, and I'll also briefly touch upon that. But after you have answered the why, comes the very important question of how. And I'll start with that. Um, this is me. I'm Shavikesh Goel. I have over 21 years in the industries, experience spread across manufacturing companies, services companies, and a major portion of my life, my career has been spent in the India market entry business, and especially in the executive recruitment and manufacturing. Mr. Rao did mention that I was a headhunter in my earlier life. I've been with Mavadona working for over, I think, 10 plus years now, and have been in this business for over 15 years, I think 15th year now running. I'll not talk much about myself. We'll jump right into why should we manufacture in India. So Mr. Rao very succinctly gave some key reasons why. I'll give you some more facts, to look at India. India has been one of the fastest growing economies in the world. I think in terms of the GDP, we are ranked number 5 at the moment. This ranking keeps going up and down between 5 and 6, but I think at the moment it is 5. We've been growing at about 7% on average in the last few years. This year, both the IMF and the World Bank are projecting 10+% of GDP growth. Let's see how this moves. We have been able to fight the COVID-19 pandemic fairly well and are getting back on our feet much faster. Another reason for this is that government a few years ago started the Make in India campaign with a dogged resolve to bring India up to speed into the world of manufacturing. Our percentage of exports or overall manufacturing in the world is very, very minuscule, not even worth mentioning. That's one of the reasons that the government is pushing the resolve of making in India. One more thing which a lot of our clients or companies which are looking at getting into India find difficult is the legal system in some other countries, which India competes with for the manufacturing space. For example, contracts in certain countries are written in their own language and you don't know what you're signing, but India follows the British common law. Contracts are in English with whoever you sign up, and you know what you're getting into. At least gives you peace of mind later. Being a democracy has its advantages, I think everyone knows. So we have a strong, legal system in place, and intellectual property is something which is very, courts are and the government both are very serious about the whole thing. So if by any chance there is a compromise on your intellectual property, you can knock at the court's doors and there is a resolution, and courts are much faster in giving you relief. The other advantage India offers is the demography in terms of the people. We are a very young country in terms of the age of people. If you look at the screen, the working age or working population is about 630 million people, which is twice the size of the population of US, the whole population of US. People between 25 and 64 years of age. And if you look at the next level of people who will move into the working age in a few years' time, between 15 and 64, this goes even further up to 830 million people, which means in the next about 30 to 40 years, you will never have a dearth of people to work for. And these people are, like Mr. Rao mentioned, bright people, very entrepreneurial, because there are tough conditions in India, which people have to, from the childhood, be brought up and come up in life. The other factor which is related to the workforce or the people who would work is the affordability. While we have enough number of people, are they affordable to work with? The minimum wage typically in India, in an Indian state, is about 1.5 US dollars per hour, which if you compare to the Western world, it's way below. And if you compare to the other emerging markets or emerging countries in the region, it still would be, if not the lowest, one of the lowest. So that's one. And geographically, if you see, India is well, I would say, located almost in the middle of Europe and Asia Pacific. And if you look from Far East to Africa, again, we're like at the center almost. We have a large coastline, so you can export from India, you can import your material into India or equipment into India. And Africa, of course, has been on the radar of many companies, and our historical ties, thanks to from Mahatma Gandhi's time, we have ties with Africa, and there again is a market, an emerging market, which could be catered to from India. Now I'll directly jump into the key potential issues, which, because everyone must be wondering, okay, fine, very nice to hear India is a good country to go and set up manufacturing, but what challenges, will I face? How will I overcome those challenges? How should I go about the whole thing? So a few key challenges I've written. There are many more, but I've tried to bring them into a shorter space here. Starting with location, I'll explain all of these in the next slides, but I'll just summarize. Location selection, where should you set up? If you remember, Mr. Rao's first remark was location. So location selection, then finding the right land over there and getting it acquired, the government approvals which you need over there to set up your factory, design coordination, starting with the architect and various other designers which will be doing the designing of your factory. Key contractors, these are the key people or key agencies which will come on board and will ensure how good or bad your project will turn out to be. Quality, we already discussed briefly in the interview with Mr. Rao, again is a topic during construction as well, not only after construction. Timelines, we'll discuss about this. Cost is always the most important factor for companies because India may be cheap in terms of labor or construction, cost of construction, but it still is a cost. And last but not the least, safety. So let me quickly go through these ones. So location selection. So India, is a large country, right? And which is why location becomes very important where you should be. There are several factors why you should choose a location. But I'll tell you what are the key issues. And incidentally, India is not like some other countries where only a small part of the country is populated. The whole country is populated, right? We have population everywhere. And so are the industries everywhere. So some key issues, I personally, in my experience, and I've been setting up factories for companies, greenfield, brownfield, all, is that most of the companies tend to go to a place where one of their acquaintances or neighboring company in their country has gone to. That's a comfort they get, without realizing the reasons why that company would have gone. So they don't do any location analysis, so to say. And India being a very large country, you definitely need to do a pan-India analysis to figure out what is the best. And this should be a very bespoke, customized kind of an analysis. So, but companies, either for saving time or maybe additional cost, because this will come at a small cost to do that, they don't do that, and they just go by the gut feel. The problem is that if you make a wrong selection, India is like, let's say, Europe in a way, right? If you have so many countries in Europe, you can treat each state India like a country, and with population many times higher than one of the countries in Europe. So if you were to look at going to Europe, you would choose different countries and then say, okay, fine, where should I go? Same analysis should be done in India. Which city or which state should I go to? So my advice typically on location selection is that one, a location analysis should be done. And two, just should be a very customized location analysis. And you still will say, yes, Shavikesh, all that is fine, but end of the day, it's our gut feel. We have been to so many countries, and in the end, the gut works always well. Yes, it does. But why don't you have some facts to validate whether your gut is feeling right or not? That's what should be your first, thing to look at in India. Second most important thing is the land, right? Now, yes, there's enough land available, but what kind of land should you buy? And how will you find the right land in the right place? Land costs could be prohibitive, especially in bigger areas or bigger cities or industrial clusters, which have already matured. Mr. Rao mentioned that if you go to a cluster, everything will be already there for you, and you will have to come up to speed much faster. How do you find the right land which is also suitable? So cheaper land not necessarily will be a solution to the higher cost of the land. A balance has to be struck between the right price of the land. And more important than that is also the time, So because not all the land in the country, which is industrial land, may be readily available or suitable to start, your construction activities, you might have to factor in a little longer than you would back home in finding a land. So there are a lot of industrial development corporations. The governments of different states have set up these industrial parks, so to say, which have land parcels available. But given the size of the country, there are not too many of them. More are being set up by state governments, but it takes time. As we speak, also they are being set up. Yesterday, in UP, they announced a 700 acre electronics manufacturing new park, industrial park for electronics manufacturing. So it's a very dynamic process. But what we should look at is land ideally, which is government land, or in an industrial zone. I would not normally recommend going for an agricultural land and then changing the land use. There might be problems later. And so if you don't find land in the industrial development corporations, the areas around that, people start investing in that land and their lands over there and develop the ecosystem. So stick to industrial land, which is either government or classified as industrial land. This will save you time and hassle for future. Now, the second or the third part is government approvals. So India still has bureaucracy. Yes, it's improving much faster. We are moving much faster on the ease of doing business global rankings, but still there is still some miles to be covered. So the government approvals would be at 3 different stages. One would be pre-construction approvals. There would be some during construction, and then most of them will be after the construction is over. Now, one should keep in mind that the approvals may take longer than you would have planned. And why I'm emphasizing on the time it would take for different activities, that there's no hard burn later, and your planning is much better. Like you mentioned that the Japanese do maybe 80-90%. The Germans also would do 80-90% time planning and then execution. Here maybe an additional few percentages would not harm. And one of the things you will hear if you have been already in this business trying to set up factories, you will hear this word called single window clearance. Now these are agencies or windows, so to say, desks set up by different state governments for ease of giving clearances. But the problem is that still there are multiple authorities within that single window which need to be nudged and pushed sometimes to give you approval. So that also could take time. One should be aware of that. My advice would be that one, you should get all your documentation in place in one go. You might say that we've been setting up factories in multiple countries, same documentation, we copy paste and give it to India. No, India has different regulations, and some of the documents may not be valid for India. Some additional documents may be needed. And all these small things also take a lot of time. Going back and forth with government officials is something which takes time. And since they have so many things on their plate, your project may get delayed getting an approval to start off. That's one. And equally important is to get the help of local consultants. Many companies say, since we have a projects team in-house, we know how we have done in so many countries, we don't need local help. We are very self-dependent or independent. But I would strongly recommend that you still would not know about India unless you have prior experience of setting up 5 plants in India. No issues. For the first time, I recommend taking help of local consultants, and more importantly, a program manager kind of an entity, which oversees everything, which takes care of the consultants, the architects, the designers, the government approvals, all rolled into one. I think is something which is important. I'll talk about it going forward. Now, the government approvals were an external factor, which is not in anyone's control, right? They are government officers and they will have their own way of looking at it. But the design coordination is an internal thing, right? So how should your plan be set up? And this is where I think, again, from experience, I can tell you, if this is not taken care of properly, this could lead to unnecessary delays, unexpected, unnecessary, unintentional delays, which no one has even thought of. So here, there should be a very clear understanding between various, technical requirements by the Indian architects and designers. Why I say that is that you will have your own, architectural brief ready to start the activities in construction. But here, there could be some homologation required for the Indian conditions. Like I said, we have a different building code, right? Some of this may not be, some of this may be still primitive from your perspective. Your firefighting safety systems may be much more advanced than what the Indian laws require you to. And you will say, I'm giving you a much advanced system. Why should I go for a lower one? But then this could lead to a problem at the approval stage. So these things are important, that all the agencies, first of all, understand, the Indian agencies understand where you're coming from, why you're saying the way things they are. At the same time, important for you to understand that why is the Indian designer or the architect saying what they are saying. And most importantly, there should be a seamless coordination between different agencies. Otherwise, what happens is when the construction starts and then everyone starts going back to the drawing board, it leads to unnecessary delays. So that's where I would recommend doing that. Selection of architects and designers should be very meticulous and carefully done. Ideally, companies who have worked with international companies on their projects, either in India or abroad, are more aligned. Otherwise, there could be more of an Indian way sometimes, which will lead more problems in understanding each other well. And like I said before, a program manager or an agency which supervises everything, it's basically your replica in the country, but who understands the country from India's perspective, should be appointed. It would be additional cost for the whole management, but think of it as an investment in the project, because if things don't go as planned, then the losses are going to be much higher than what you would save hiring such an agency. So that's something which I would strongly recommend. Again, from experience, I can tell you. Key contractors after the designers, they're the next key component of the cost of the project as well as the execution. So the contractors in India over the years have evolved themselves and are very competent and capable, right? But still there are some issues. So availability of labor, the workers on the site, could become an issue or challenge, because the contractors tend to divert their workforce to different sites during the course of the project. Now you might find it a little funny or annoying that the contractor committed so many people. Why do they divert that workforce? It's basically trying to either cut costs or improve their own profits by just shuffling the same workforce. The workers sometimes could not be available. So that's one topic to be careful about. The other is the competence of the subcontractors. Now, the main contractors, whether the civil contractor or the utilities contractors, they may not be doing everything themselves. They would further outsource to subcontractors. Now, whether the subcontractors have the same competence and capability is something which you will have to monitor. The contractors will just get sometimes the cheapest subcontractor, may not be suitable for delivering your quality of construction. So that's another area. Right tools, even though your agreement would talk of what all are the tools and implements needed, including the safety equipment for the workers, many times the contractors will not provide those tools, again to save on costs, right? Even though you pay for it, they will not provide for it, and that's where one has to be careful. Now see, what I'm saying, some of these points may sound very shocking or maybe surprising to you, some of you, but I'm telling you from a practical perspective how this works in India. And if you're better, forewarned is forearmed. So if you're prepared for this, then it's better. And delays, this is something which is very irritating and annoying. So delays by contractors are common, and whoever you take, there will be delays. So you cannot avoid delays. So when you cannot avoid something, you should factor it in the initial, planning when you're doing it. Our advice on the key contractors is that the selection should be very carefully done. Yes, the better ones will come at a higher price, right? They will charge high for their services, but I think it's worth paying that additional price or fee which they charge. Of course, it has to be negotiated. I'm not saying that you just burn money, but this is very important. You should not be fooled by someone who talks very well but will not be able to deliver. And the second important thing is that the contractors, however good or big they are, they should be closely monitored, very, very closely monitored on two aspects: quality and timelines. Costs, as I said, I'll talk about cost later, but if you already have planned well, you may not have to worry about costs that much. But the quality and time necessary, there are delays, there will be escalations in costs. If the quality is not being delivered, you may have to redo what is being done on the site. Again, adds to the cost. So these two things I would recommend we should be very careful about. Now, coming to the quality, I just spoke of quality. Now, the quality of workmanship is something which I've been in the last, since 2006 at least, hearing a lot about from our European clients especially. It's always a topic of discussion. That why, sorry, why can't the workers or whoever is working on the site get better quality, deliver better quality? Now, one of the key reasons is that in India, still the workers you see on the site or the masons or other people working are not trained people. They're not qualified to be a mason or qualified to be a technician on the site. They typically would be having it in inheritance. Generations in the family would be doing this, and they would just continue. It becomes a family business in a way for them, or family profession. Now, because of which they are used to doing things in a certain way, which may not be the right way or your kind of way. So that is one area. Second, in order to save costs, the contractors may not hire the best or the most competent workers. So it's not that you will not pay. So if you negotiate and the contractor says, I will charge this much per worker per day, you say, fine, we agree. But again, to bump up their margins, they might not depute so many out of 100, maybe only 30, maybe those competent people, and the remaining may not be. So that's another area one has to be careful about. And I think the expectations, which forms the most important part of quality. Now, what is the definition of quality? I was talking to Mr. Rao earlier on what is quality and what is his experience. The answer remains the same. The quality, there are different levels of quality, and each quality is good or equally bad. So you should be very well aware of in the beginning itself, am I going to build a Taj Mahal in India, or I'm going to make a very functional facility which may not be as per my global standards, but which definitely works as per the Indian conditions. And that is something, once you have settled this in the beginning itself, that's part of planning, there will be less dissatisfaction or heartburns later. So our recommendation on the quality, how do you maintain good quality, is hiring of good contractors. So what you get when you hire a good contractor is that they also will get good workers. That's how the whole thing works. The ethical companies, they will not cheat. And the second is the benchmarking of quality levels. What should be an acceptable quality level? It may not be 100% as per your, I'm not saying it will always be, but if it is not 100%, that what is an agreeable quality level for both the parties, you as well as all the others on the site who are going to deliver. And then once you have set that as a benchmark, then this should be rigorously monitored. And I'll keep emphasizing the fact that the close monitoring of the site is something which has to be, there's no second question about it. You have to monitor it very closely, and which is where getting a company to do it for you, because the monitoring from an Indian perspective is different than monitoring from a European perspective. So that is something which also has to be done. Timelines, I mentioned earlier, in India, we have this time called Indian Standard Time, IST, but sometimes we call it Indian Stretchable Time, right? It's funny, but that's a joke on ourselves. So sometimes the timelines may not be, adhered to, not because of any specific reason. It's just a general habit, maybe, right? So the contractors especially tend to delay the work for no reason again, not because the workers were not available or just because the material did not come in time. No, basic habit. It happens. And I can tell you from my personal experience, practical experience. The other interesting factor here is the labor fluctuation. Now, India being a very diverse and vast country, we have multiple key festivals across the country, and different regions have different times when they have festivals. At the same time, we have at least 2 major harvesting seasons. Now, all the labor or workers which work on a site, they are from villages typically, right? And few states which provide this kind of workforce. They tend to go back because they want to go and be the additional hands to do the harvesting, or for festivals they want to be with their families and all. And during that time, doesn't matter what stage the project is, they will just go. Now, if it's a critical stage of your project and these half of the workers go, then it's a delay. Now, how do you overcome this? Because this keeps happening the year round. So you already plan for this beforehand. Now, if you know that there's next month going to be a festival or harvesting season or some other event, so that's where again the close monitoring will ensure that the contractor does not overlook this important aspect, and your work happens. Maybe he gets the labor from another area or another state or another location. So factoring in the contingencies about time is very important. You cannot say that, okay, since I've planned 80-90%, it would work like clockwork. It would not. I always maintain that India would be like the Murphy's Law. If something can go wrong, it will go wrong. How do you avoid that? The only way is that you are more aware of the whole thing and then you take actions accordingly. And the other thing to be noted is that the timelines, here, you don't have to really communicate that if it is 6 months or 9 months or 12 months, you're anticipating the same amount should be told. No, there should be kept a small buffer so that if something still goes beyond our best efforts, there is still time within the overall time budgeted to bring the project back on the timelines. Cost I spoke of earlier. So obviously cost in India is lesser because of the cost of labor being cheaper. Material also in many cases is cheaper. If you're buying made in India products, they would be cheaper. There'll be no import duties and all. So it is, yes, but there could still be cost overruns, So some of the reasons could be that the detailed budgeting, when you were doing initially, it was not done in as many details, right? You said, okay, fine, I understand this, an overview. I've done this several times over, fine, let's go ahead. The initial budget, which you have, let's say the architect has devised, may be very on the conservative side, and this is normally a tendency to make you happy. Okay, fine. If your budget is X, I'll try to do it within X minus some amount. And there, I would say realistic amounts should be budgeted, not to please yourself or please somebody else. And wherever localization can be done, you can use local equipment, should be done. Our advice is that the detailing of the specifications is very important. I mentioned earlier that your specifications would be as per the global standards, right? May not be required in India or may not be necessary in India. So how do you homologate those specifications for the Indian conditions is very important while you're doing the budgeting. Then the budget should be prepared realistically, I repeat, not to please anyone. You should not be pleased if you suspect that this doesn't look so proper. And there should be contingencies built in the budgets. There would be deviations, I can assure you. In spite of your best efforts, there will be deviations. And if you have not budgeted for those deviations, for the contingencies, it becomes very difficult later to go back to your board and say, I need more money because of this. There's no way how you convince that. So that, I would say, be cautious. Last but not the least, safety. What you see written here, some of you or some of my Indian colleagues may not agree to that, but I've seen it practically on site, so I'm just mentioning that. It is still something which is not a top priority for us as a country, if you ask me. Safety is still not something, whether during construction or even later. As an international company, you would have standards which you insist should be followed. And there, two areas on the construction site, it's like a war zone, right? Anything could go wrong, accidents happen all the time. Two areas to be careful about. One is on the contractor's side. The contractors see the safety as an additional burden. And they're like, oh my God, even though you would have budgeted the cost of those additional safety features, whether it's the equipment, the safety equipment, the personal equipment, or other tools needed for safety, everything will be paid for. Even then, they will say, oh, it's a hassle for me. Now, how many times do I tell this guy to wear shoes or helmets? Imagine, you'll find people walking barefoot on the site, which probably elsewhere in the developed world, you will never even think of. But it happens here without helmets, people wearing without protective glasses and gloves and all those things. That is one. Second is that the workers themselves, the people who are going to be affected by that, lack of safety measures, are themselves very careless, because they are, like I said, they're not trained workers, right? They have got inheritance. The skills have been inherited over the generations. Or if it's just people lifting heavy weight on their heads and moving around, they don't care. They are happy that they're getting paid every day, daily wages. They're good enough for them. Wearing shoes, maybe many of them have never worn shoes in their life. It's uncomfortable, and the safety shoes are heavy and metal toed and all. It doesn't feel comfortable. Or harnesses, for example, working at heights, they feel discomforted wearing a harness. They would not. The problem is they may be unaware and not care about their own safety, but something happens. The liability or the effect directly comes on the principal employers, which is you and the contractor. So here, I would say the compliances are very important. A safety officer should definitely be appointed on the project. It's an additional cost, but not that high a cost which you would incur if something wrong goes. And the job of the safety officer should be just to ensure that there are compliances. As a deterrent, I would tell you, this again is from experience, monetary penalties are a great deterrent, right? Both to the contractor and to the workers. If you deduct half a day's wage from the worker or 1 day wage from the worker's account, it pinches a lot. But then that person and everyone in the group is very clear for the rest of the project's life that they cannot take safety for granted. So that brings me to the conclusion. There are only a few names I've mentioned on this slide, which you see on the screen at the moment. These are world famous companies, iconic companies making iconic products from across different sectors. It's only not even a handful of companies. There are hundreds and hundreds more, which have made India as their manufacturing base. This I'm just sharing with you to give you the confidence, in addition to what Mr. Rao earlier said, that why you should look at India. To give you the confidence that yes, it is possible for these companies to make same world-class products in India and be successful. Some of them have been here for over 100 years, right? More than 100 years. I could go on, the list is too long, but just to give you a flavor. To conclude, what I said in the last 30 odd minutes is that the large domestic market, which India offers, and the pool of talented, young people at affordable prices, which is very important, not just the quantity, but the quality and the price. So this ensures that, you don't have to ask why India. You should be asking when India. When should we look at India for our manufacturing? We could start with maybe a subcontracting. We could start with maybe a sub-assembly, and then look at full manufacturing. But I think the time has come now when you should stop thinking why India, but when India. You should not miss the bus, because the others are not waiting. And whether it's a short term or the long term, that you want to export from India, I think it's imperative that now you look at India. Some of you might be thinking of India as an alternative to other major manufacturing destinations. That's also good, but I would say India in itself would be a good place to start with manufacturing. While there could be challenges, of course, I've already highlighted this was to actually help you understand what challenges could face. I could have been talking only about the good things, good part, but I thought, no, let me think of what could not be so good for you. Yes, there are challenges, but as you've seen some of the big names I showed in the previous slide, these challenges can be managed, and companies are managing. And then, making their products in India, whether it's raw material, whether it's equipment, components, finished goods, whatever. And very important, I repeat, is that the project should be supervised by a program management company, which does not only do the project management, which is the site construction management, but the whole, ambit of all the activities which are needed on a project. And as I said, some of the most iconic companies have set up their plants in India. More are in the queue. Latest being Tesla. We've just heard a couple of weeks ago, maybe they also come in. They have set up a small R&D center in India. A lot of companies have set up their R&D centers as a first step, then go into manufacturing. So with this, I bring this to the end, and now open to your questions. If you have any, let me know.
Let me quickly interject there, Shavikesh. We have a whole barrage of questions, since you have touched upon every single aspect that we can think of, not just the benefits, but also the challenges that we are talking about. And we have just about 25 questions and hardly 10 minutes to take them up.
Wow.
And we still have a lot of questions that are coming up. So let me quickly just pick up one or two here that seem extremely relevant. Again, like you said, that there are challenges in terms of time estimates in India, and it can be really frustrating. You mentioned that there can be delays. How much time and delay can one calculate into the planning, and how do we do that?
Okay, like I said, if you look at what are the causes of delays, or what are the potential causes of delays, right? Which activities could lead to delays? Mm-hmm. Then with the help of a local consultant, as I mentioned, then they will be able to help you understand that this activity can maximum, I'm not saying that a delay could be 10 years delay. On a 12-month project, there cannot be a 10 years delay. Mm-hmm. But if you have already factored those things, like I said, labor issues, right? So if you, let's say, start in the month of January, your construction activities, right? In the month of February itself, there'll be, one season for harvesting and sowing coming in. Then there would be around the monsoon time. There would be, you cannot do for a month and a half, you cannot do any activity on the ground. It's pouring most of the countries, witnessing rains. So all of these things, when you list down that these are the factors which will cause delays, you can very well plan those delays. How much, I cannot give a straight answer here now, but I can tell you on a total project, if you have factored in, they may not be factored, planned delays would not be more than maybe a month and a half to 2 months at max. If you plan it well. If you don't, it could be 6 months, it could be 12 months also. If that answers.
Okay, so basically, like they say, when it comes to India, agility, adaptability, and factor in all delays that you can. India's stretchable time has to be factored into account. India is currently going through some significant IP reforms. Can you tell us about intellectual property rights in India and how secure it is?
Okay, so I'm not an expert on intellectual property rights. My colleague, Dhruv, who heads our legal team, would be the right person. But I can assure you that I already mentioned that earlier, that because of the legal system which we have, and a very robust legal system, so your intellectual property rights are secured. I would not name a country, but there are countries where even the government would look the other way. If you found somebody was copying and counterfeiting your products, they would just look the other way. Here it is not. So here the government is very serious, the courts are very serious, and it's a great offense in our country to steal somebody's intellectual property. Is all I can say. But yes, maybe if you have a more specific query on that, my colleague from the legal team would be happy to answer.
Okay, great. So whoever has questions with regards to intellectual property, please write to us at India Business Month 2021 at mvindia.com, and we'll be sure to answer you. So one is a two-pronged question. So to say, you said that you should hire good contractors. How do you assess good contractors and architects? And can your architect be from outside India?
Yes. So ideally, I would say the architect should be from India, or at least having some India experience. Let me answer the architect question first. A few projects we have done in the past, the architect was a global architect for the client, but you still need a local architect for a couple of reasons. One, the local architect will know the local bylaws, the building bylaws, which your architect internationally may not. Again, I repeat, if they have experience with India, no worries, then they would know. But if they don't have, and normally bigger companies have a global projects team or global architectural teams, they would work. So that is on the architect side. On the contractor side, as I said, it's always good to see or hire contractors who have worked in similar situations, which means they have worked with international companies setting, their factories in India. So there is already a base level understanding at the contractors level that this is doable, this is not doable, this is acceptable, not acceptable. That alignment is there. It is lesser pain for these kind of contractors to help them understand what you want exactly than what they're used to. That is one. And two, like I said in my presentation, going for slightly bigger, more established companies, as contracting companies is better. They will come at a higher cost, I repeat, but then that additional cost will not be as much as you might, suffer if you end up hiring a wrong one or not the suitable one. Does it answer? I don't know.
Let's hope so. And if not, of course, we have the email address that we've already shared. We can definitely answer in more detail. Next question, as India aims to become a top manufacturing hub in India, what kind of changes have you seen in terms of the challenges you faced during greenfield setups in India? So you've done a few greenfield setups, as we know, Shavikesh, and how have you seen the scenery changing, so to say, after India bringing up the new reforms and making Make in India such a big campaign here, hoping to get more labor, more labor intensive, getting more jobs for people. How do you think the scenery has changed?
So on the manufacturing side, the good thing, is because of the reforms, and I would call it the second wave of reforms after the current government came into picture 2014 onwards, they came in. And with this Make in India push. So two things have happened. One, and they're interrelated. One, a lot of companies have now, in the last 5-6 years have come into India and set up their manufacturing or sub-assemblies, right? Or sometimes contract manufacturing, but all of it in the process, they are gaining in experience. Now, how it helps the locals in India is that when an international company comes in with those international best practices, every stakeholder in the project management, in the manufacturing setup, learns in the process. So the good thing is that I mentioned that the contractors have been evolving rather fast now as compared to maybe 10-15 years ago. Because so many companies have come in, even the contractors who are not up to speed, they have realized, okay, fine, this is how it is done in other parts of the world. When they interact with the international architects, they realize, okay, fine, this is how it should be done. Yeah. And because it's very competitive now, it's a global world out there, right? So it's no longer a global village, as we call. So they also want to, tap into those markets where they can, maybe beyond the Indian shores, go and do the construction, and which is where I would say the overall quality has improved for these contractors in the meanwhile. And it's a long topic. I mean, I could talk for hours on this, but just to give a very, very short answer at the moment, yes.
Okay, no, that's a very good example. It's very nice to know that we have a very specific example here, because that is what helps us at the end of the day. At least, I mean, there are a lot of things that go into a whole manufacturing, but if you have a good contractor with you, like you said, it just makes things easier. So I'll take up last two questions since we are left with just 3 minutes to end this. Labor unions. So everybody has heard about them. Everybody is scared of them, and everybody wants to know what kind of risk factors this brings into the whole picture.
See, labor unions are I would say, a necessity in a country like India, right? There have been enough instances in the past wherein a lot of industrialists or bigger companies have ended up exploiting the labor, the workers, right? This is post manufacturing, of course. You're talking, there's no labor union when you're constructing a site. There's hardly any labor union, but you're talking when the production happens.
Yes.
Labor unions are there, they're healthy. In a democracy, you should have a right to also, have a counter view, not whatever the management says you agree. But it all depends on the respective management.
Yeah.
There have been companies which have for decades now, international companies I'm talking of, without a single labor incident, they've been managing the labor unions well and the relationship with them very well, without an issue. And there have been companies who almost every day, every year, every month, they have issues coming up. So it all depends on how you want to manage. The good thing with Europeans especially is that they treat the workforce not as a workforce, and they treat as partners, right? I know this at least from my own experience. And that I think sets the equation in a different way. So which means you don't really have to worry about how will I handle labor union, right? It could be a necessity beyond a certain number of employees in your company. You will have to, in a factory, for example, you will have to allow legally a labor union to be created. But is it a nuisance you see that, or you say, no, this is something which of course is a necessity. It's for their own benefit, but we will manage in a very cordial way. If it is us versus them, you will have labor issues from day one. If you say, no, they are also equal colleagues, they may be having different skill sets and at a different level. At the end of the day, if they don't do their good job, we'll not do anything. So if you have that bonhomie, like a symbiosis, I would say, it works well. And anyways, the government is also bringing a lot of labor reforms to help both the companies and the workers themselves have better say in each other. Earlier, the labor laws are very, very tough in India. And the last 2 to 3 years, they have become very relaxed and lenient for it, especially attracting international companies. I mean, again, it's a very, very long, big topic. Another day.
Okay, so the key takeaway from that is symbiosis. So anything that you want to do in India has to be symbiotic in its nature, and it, I think, will fall into place automatically. It is 3:30 as per Indian time, but I will take up this one question because it's extremely interesting for me and will be good to end the session on: why India and not Indonesia or Vietnam?
I think my first slide, if you look at that, did say that the first bullet point on my first slide was that India is a large domestic market. Of course, Indonesia and Vietnam are equally good countries, and maybe you can do better over there in terms of manufacturing. But are you looking at it in just isolation that I need one island to manufacture and that's it? What do you do after that? Now, India's GDP, if you look at, is about $3 trillion at the moment, which I said is number 5th in the world. Which means you manufacture in India also, and you also have a captive market available for you, right? You can also export. If you go to Vietnam, it's a tiny country, right? Irrespective, however good they would be, you will not be able to find that market. Imagine 1.3 or 1.4 billion people. I'm not saying all of these are your market, but even if you look at the top, let's say 200 to 300 million people, that's the size of the US population, and that could be your market.
Yeah.
That this is the middle class we're talking of, right? Which would have the capability and the propensity to spend money on international products or technologies. So while Indonesia and Vietnam are equally good, I would not say they're bad. But if you look in isolation, of course you can go to any country. But if you look at holistically, and that's where you should look at India. India is not a country; it's a continent. It's a subcontinent, like a continent. Look at it like the European continent, and I think that would answer your question. Why should I go to one country and not the whole of Europe?
Perfect. That also answers a lot for me. Thank you so much, Avikesh, for all your answers and for the presentation. And time did fly by so quickly. I didn't even realize that we were actually bang on time right now. I know we haven't been able to answer all questions, and it is very apparent that there is so much interest in this subject. So if you have more questions, please write to us, like I said, at India Business Month 2021 at mb-india.com. And for the participants whose questions have remained unanswered, we shall revert to you.